I'm teaching at a liberal arts college. My class has around 40, and I've done the passion-driven statistics 3 times, and one other faculty have done it as well. I really chose to go this route. I used to teach this way, walked away from it, and came back because I wanted to really focus on a lack that I saw in my students, which is they could memorize things, but they were really anxious and they didn't know how to use it. And my goal as a psychologist was to get them to be scientists and be really good at that. And what I loved about the passion-driven statistic is that it focused on the whole scientific process. So finding questions, but also really concrete things like data management, figuring out how to measure things. And we were using a complicated data set, AdHealth, with 3,000 variables. And so just figuring out, how do you measure depression? How do you measure that? That was something that was really important. So they got into coding. I love that they got into coding. Building variables. I liked the fact that we did this over the whole semester. The last 2 weeks, they really focused on their question. And what they often did is they got to the end, and they turned off the phone, and then they got to the end, and then they realized, oh, I could have measured this before, and I could have measured this better, and they redid all their variables. But because they had worked on it in syntax, they could revise it really well, and they felt really confident about doing that. So from their perspective, really worked well on the mastery, really worked well on the enthusiasm, and their skills were so much better than they'd been before. From my perspective, what I loved about it is I like coaching students instead of lecturing to students, and this just gave me a chance to be a coach. So I would prep them with I gave them a little 5-minute quiz on something they were supposed to have prepared ahead of time. I sort of riffed off of what they were having problems with for 10 minutes, gave them another 10 minutes worth of lecture, and then they worked on their own. So they was very light on lecturing, and I just did a lot of shoulder surfing. So I'm much happier as a coach than I am as a sage on the stage. So that made me happy. Like I said, I have been very happy, and I would also just note, for those of you who are up for tenure, is that I've taught this for a long time, and I think I'm pretty good at it. I have never in my whole life got as good teacher ratings as I have when we moved to this. It was an instant up, not just me, but the other faculty as well. Our teacher ratings went through the roof as soon as we went to this, and our biggest problem is we used to have 50% of students who took Research Methods 1 went on to Research Methods 2. Now it's virtually 100%, and we can't handle it because there's so many students who want more statistics courses. So that's a good thing.
I'm Diane Need, and I'm an adjunct instructor at Lewis University, and my background is traditional math. So this was all new to me when Amanda asked me to teach it, but hands down, my students and I both loved it. I taught it twice in the fall. I didn't get to teach it in the spring, but in the fall it was taught as storytelling with data. And then there was a last-minute opening in a course called Data Analytics and Human Performance, which is, a lot of just data analytics in sports and exercise science. And so I told them, well, I really don't know a lot about sports and exercise science, but I can teach them the data analytics. And the thing I love about this course is how it can apply to anyone. So my storytelling with data students, they were just taking it as a general math requirement, but my data analytics and human performance students, they were really looking for something that related to health, performance of athletes, something they could use in their coaching field. And I could tailor the same course to both the needs. just by picking the data sets that I had. So I chose some more data sets, and I directed my students in the human performance class to the data sets that would help them out, whereas storytelling with data, they kind of had an open, and they got to teach, or they got to choose any data sets that they were interested in. What I loved about this course and how it turned out is, as an instructor, I'm thinking, I'm teaching analytics, I'm teaching statistics, and I'm teaching them to code. But that's not how the students see it. The students perceive it as, I'm really researching something that's very interesting to me. And the learning of statistics and coding and analytics to them is secondary, but they're learning so much. And I think that's what drives the course, what drives their interest. And honestly, I had no problem at all with late work or people not engaging at all. It's like they really wanted to know. And it's not because they had any great passion for statistics. None of my students had had any sort of programming or analytics before they hit my class. But once they chose their variables, they were so passionate about their research project that they were more than willing, more than excited to use the tools that would give them that information. And I think that's what a project-based research project class is. It's teaching students the skills they need to research something that they're really passionate about. Another great thing about this class is just the quality materials surpasses anything I could have put together on my own. I teach another business statistics class, and I can find videos or they're homemade videos, but this just is top-notch, professional. All the materials are there. All I had to do is arrange them on Blackboard so they're easily accessible to my students. So it gives me confidence to walk into a classroom with such professional materials to back up what I'm doing. That was even commented on in my reviews. I think students attributed a lot more to me than they should have, and I did give the credit to Lisa in class, but the students were just very impressed with the level of professionalism and the courses that were there. And to mirror what everybody else says is the response by the students was very strong. They loved the course. I didn't have anybody have a negative response at all to the course. I had several students say that they thought they would go on to learn more analytics and more programming. And they had also mentioned that they were surprised that they had known friends or relatives that had done coding before. And one of my students, he actually used the word, he said, I always thought it was just a bunch of gobbledygook. He said, I'm a sports guy. He goes, I'm not a math guy. I'm not a programming guy. He goes, but by the end of the course, he said, I see how I could really do this. And for me as an educator, that in math, that's always been my passion, to show students that math is not hard, programming is not hard, you can do it, you just got to learn it. And this puts it in the format that just makes it very easy for students to learn and feel confident about what they've done.
So I'm Stephanie Donauer, and I'm from Xavier University. And I've been using this approach for a while now in both undergraduate and graduate, and then online and on ground. And I think this approach is so great just because, well, I'm an epidemiologist by training. So for me, it felt like a natural approach. So kind of felt like taking what I had been doing and then applying it. But it is different, I think, from what the students are traditionally used to. But I think the wonderful thing about it is kind of building off of what Diane said, like they realize that I can do this, you know, and I think, you know, a lot of times they're hearing all of these research findings just like in, you know, in class when they do research or on the news or what have you, but it's kind of, you know, a mystery to them as to how it really happens. Like, how did these people find this information and how did they answer these questions? And so I think this approach really empowers them because they're able to really see that, okay, this is how this works. And when I hear this finding, you know, presented in the news, I can now have like conceptually understand how the data were obtained and then how the researchers would have gone through and identified these variables and run these analyses. The other thing I see the course as being really valuable for is sort of like identifying those who might be interested in coding and analytics but wouldn't have had exposure to it if it weren't for this course. So in that regard, I kind of see this course as a springboard for those types of students who may take this further. You know, some of them may not. Some of them may not have such an interest in coding, but others really get into it and really just sort of go on and do above and beyond what would be required for the course because they just enjoy the coding part of it. And so I think it's really valuable for that. I think there aren't a lot of courses that give students the tools to be able to, you know, do this type of analysis in a health services administration major or in many other majors. But especially with, you know, big data becoming such a big talking point and so valuable, and those skills, that skill set being so valuable, this really opens that door for those students. You know, it's not going to make them, you know, able to go out and get a job as an analyst on big data after they finish this course, but it's going to open the door that might otherwise not have been opened. So that's where I think this approach is really valuable. I think it's a great, just a great gift to teachers and to students. And also, I'm not sure if it was Nancy or Diane that mentioned the production value and quality of the videos, but that it was much better than what I could have done myself as well. And so that is really valuable as well. So just all in all, a great package, I think.
In terms of the type of students mine are undergraduates, regional university. Most of them are first generation students. They're probably working full time, paying for themselves. And so this course having the free access, free resources, you know, is a benefit for them. It really provides them, you know, just an opportunity to have one less stress in terms of financial need for the course. So they do like that, and it is nice to be able to say that to students, that I'm not asking you to spend, you know, money on software or on a book or anything. Now, and it also allows for, if you do need to have them buy software because of what your department wants, they're not paying for a book. So you can offset that and say, well, we're not doing that, but you're going to pay for this. And so I know Nancy has done that where they need, you know, SPSS. So it gives you that flexibility, which is just what I love, you know, one of the things I love about this course. My students were traditionally pretty bad students, meaning they just didn't have the skills. They didn't come prepared for college. You know, they didn't prepare for classes. They didn't know how to take notes. They didn't have good study skills, which I think many of us, that's how our students come to us. And so I found that my students would say, you know, it taught me to be a better student in general. It taught me that, you know, I did need to prepare for class, and that these videos were really engaging, and that I found if I watched them, I got so much more ahead, and then I could work on my homework, you know, and on this lab assignment in the classroom setting. So they would say it's like I have the easy button, you know, when they want us as instructors, they want us when they're doing their homework, and that's what this class is. They're working on their project and their lab assignments with us right there, whether it be, you know, in a classroom face-to-face or online, synchronous or not. And so it just really, you know, provides a lot of opportunity to meet the students where they are, and just to really go beyond teaching them statistics, but adding some critical thinking skills and as well as just developing their student skills.
We started doing this as a virtual class mid-semester. So we were right in the middle of finding the project. And a couple things I just wanted to say. First of all, it worked really, really well. In fact, I have learned a lot of skills doing it as a hybrid class that when we go back face-to-face, I'm going to absolutely use. I thought that we were invaluable. But a couple things that made it work really well is one of the things I love about doing it face-to-face is that the students help each other. So one of the things we did is have them introduce themselves to each other, exchange phone numbers, and so they would do the homework together. So they'd meet outside of class and be study buddies outside of class, and that helped maintain their mental health. And it also meant that they could help each other. So they'd both be on Zoom, they'd both be doing their work, and they'd be helping each other, and I wasn't there. So that was good. That worked really well. A second thing that worked really well was I did short Zoom lectures, and then just like I did in class, I'd lecture and then they'd work on their own. Well, what we did that worked really well is I would lecture and I'd say, go work. And I left my Zoom link open. They would go off and do something else, and when they might even log off Zoom. But then they needed me, and they just pop back in. And by just keeping my window open, they could pop in and out, and it was just like shoulder surfing. And the students could get on. They could share their screen. I could look at their code. I could answer their questions. Other people could watch me, because if I was in the classroom, maybe just the person next to them could do that. But in a Zoom classroom, as many other people who want to pop in can do it. So it was really time efficient for me. And similar to what many people said, I had a couple of extra office hours. So instead of having 2 hours a week, I had a half an hour a day with 15-minute meetings, because it was right there when they needed it. And the students would pop in, share their screens. They were really efficient. A ridiculous amount of time when students would come in real life office hours, they'd show up and say, oh, I have the stats problem. I said, show me what your problem is. They said, oh, I forgot my computer. It's like, well, I can't help you without the computer. If they were on Zoom, they always had their computer. They were open, they were prepped, they were ready, and they were actually really much more efficient. One of the things I really do want to emphasize, and it's so implicit for all of us, I bet, it's like, what is water to a fish? They need software. At least most of us need software. And my students use SPSS. And we used to use it in a computer lab. And thank God we got away from that 2 semesters when we went to passion-driven statistics. We're SPSS users, and they can rent it for the year for $90, which is a third the cost of what the book used to be, and they've got no other cost for the class. $60 for a semester. They have it on their laptops. So when we sent them home, they had it at home. And when you teach in class, face-to-face, they could come to any classroom and use SPSS every single day. R will obviously do that. SAS Online will do that. But it used to be SPSS you couldn't. Well, you can now as a rental. It's actually really cheap. So it increases your flexibility to go hybrid or entirely virtual.
Completely online, I will say I think the students tend to divide into the students you get to know really well, and then the students that kind of just do the work but aren't necessarily really making a lot of contact. And so with the transition, the thing that was kind of nice is that I felt like I kind of knew the students already because they had been on ground, and then we transitioned to online. So even though it was online, I still felt like I knew all of my students. So talking about, we are planning an on-ground fall, but, also we're going to do it in such a way that students are spaced throughout the week. So we're not going to have the entire class present. And I kind of think this model is sort of the perfect thing to implement during a classroom that's situated like that, because what I noticed is that when we would have our Zoom meetings for questions, a lot of times, they would just put they would cover their picture, so I couldn't really see their faces. They would mute themselves. I didn't really know if they were there. And it felt like in the classroom, I could really gauge the reactions a little bit better. So those question answer sessions, I think, go better live. And I think that kind of works out for this because each student's going to have an opportunity to come on ground. But because we're spacing them, we're actually, going to have fewer students per live session. And I, again, think that's beneficial because those students who might not have spoken up before are now going to have fewer students in the room. They're going to be more comfortable in the smaller groups, and I think that they're going to be more likely to ask the questions.
Lost students are always a problem, and we try to give, the way we turn it in, there's a semester-long project, and they turn in each section of the project, like the intro and then the methods and all of that stuff. And it's very time-consuming to get good feedback, and the better students come in and ask you for more and more feedback, and the lost students tend to just sort of read what you have and try to respond. One of the things we're implementing next semester, because we know we'll have less touch on the students, is instead of spending 15 minutes writing notes that they may or may not read on their projects, we're requiring them to have a 15-minute Zoom meeting with us. Because it's easier to walk through and talk to them about the project and more effective, and then we lose them less. So we'll meet with every student for 15 minutes 3 times a semester. takes less time than grading the papers. You asked about negative things, so I'm going to say a couple of negative things. Is from the student's perspective and one from mine. Some of the students think of this as a math course and not a statistics course. And to me, statistics is all, for me as a psychologist, is about using statistics. And they say, oh, I'm taking a math course, and what they're used to is not actual mathematics, but it's about, oh, this week we're doing this technique, and all I have to do is this technique. And one of the things I love and they hate about the course is that they learn a number of tools, and then they have to decide which tool to use, which I think is the guts of learning statistics. But that can be frustrating for some students that are looking to memorize something and say, oh, this is the week we're doing chi-squares. The answer to every question is do a chi-square. Now we're doing ANOVA. They don't like that, but that's what they got to learn. So I'm happy with it. They're not always. The other thing that I will say, the only thing that I find lacking with this, and it's easy for me to get around, but you should know this going in. The materials from Passion-Driven Statistics are superb in terms of understanding and talking about the research process, how to do library research, how to build variables, all of those things. The write-up, everything is great. I find it, well, I'll just say, I would not be able to watch the movie, the half-hour movie on ANOVA and know how ANOVA works. I just don't. I just wouldn't. And it's important for my students that they actually learn not over only when to do it, but why it works in the theory. And so you just need to know for those weeks that you're really focusing on, here's the techniques we're covering, let's talk about that's times when you're going to have to find additional resources to pull in, because the movies alone, and certainly not the book, is not enough for that. So you're going to have to pull in additional resources. I love that the videos for the class are between 5 and like 30 minutes long. That's a great time. I mean, I know when I'm prepping for class, I watch them when I'm in the gym. A lot of you can watch them on your phone because they're all on YouTube. It works great. That's a really good time frame for the students. And they're much more understandable as well as engaging than reading a textbook.
One thing I think instructors would like to know is how helpful you are, Kristen and Lisa. Because when I started this course, I had programming in Python, but quite honestly, statistics wasn't ever a focus before I taught this. I taught online business stats once, and I was kind of nervous because I had never used SAS, and I had to learn it and teach it, and I had never worked with data sets before. And that is all just readily there, but I went into the course with no fear. Lisa's like, Diane, what time's your course? She said, if you have a question during your class, just email me during your class. And she responds like right away. Because when I was first starting out and I was still kind of fuzzy on things, and you don't want to walk into a class and not feel very professional with your students. I would sometimes email her when a student emailed me a question, and she gets right back to me. And, after like a month with a few questions, then, she had answered all my questions to the point then I could just sail. And I think any teacher going into this, maybe having some hesitation, thinking this is too new, there's too many things going on. Don't feel that way at all. There is so much support, and it's support readily there quickly every day. You can totally do this. So don't let any fear of, I'm not that competent at this, or there's too much material, scare you off at all. There's too much help.
I think this course, the Passion-Driven, is more turnkey than when I've done preps. I mean, I've done lots of preps for new stats courses. This has been so much easier. It's got a curriculum. You can just follow along with it, and it takes a lot of work. You have to be comfortable with a little fluidity, because it's not like, here, I'm doing my PowerPoint, but was so much less prep for me, and so much, and especially since every semester you do it, you build up additional resources and additional handouts, and you just use them again the next semester. There's so many to start with. People are very generous about sharing their stuff. You could steal their best stuff, and they've got it. You start with a great syllabus that goes along with the movies. It really is very turnkey. Really, I as a new instructor, I think this is the easiest thing to adopt. Actually, not the hardest.